Hello there, and welcome back to the Sleep Science. You're already weightless, suspended in thick black ink. The soft hiss of a breather's your only lullaby. Outside the thick acrylic of your submersible's viewport, the world disappears in gradients of navy to pure void, as if you've dipped yourself into the dreamless underside of the Earth. The descent is slow, pressurized, monitored, and yet there's that prickling at the back of your neck, like something ancient has just noticed you. The temperature drops, your body shivers despite the heating elements, and you remember, you are now entering a world where the sun is only a myth. You probably won't survive this, so before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're brave enough, let me know where you're tuning in from and what time it is in your little corner of the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You drop past the epipelagic zone, that's the sunlit layer, a measly 200 meters deep, and leave behind everything evolution prepared you for. Fish scatter in streaks of silver and blue as you pass through the mesopelagic twilight, the last hints of day filtering down in green shadows. Your vessel is cradled by pressure so immense it would collapse your lungs like paper bags if not for the pod's reinforced shell. Each meter deeper adds another layer of weight. Soon it's like an elephant perched on every square inch of your body. Most people picture the deep sea as a flat desert, but that's only part of the story. Even now you're gliding down over sheer cliffs and mountain ranges taller than the Alps. Scientists call them seamounts, and some believe they're still forming lava pulsing beneath the crust. But right now all you see is darkness and the occasional blur of something bioluminescent wriggling out of your field of view. It's like watching ghosts through a snow globe. The temperature's plummeted to near freezing, and yet your systems hum quietly, machines built with the patience of submariners and the paranoia of deep-sea explorers. Fun fact, the first humans to visit the Mariana Trench's bottom did so in the 60s, inside the bathyscaphe Trieste. Historians still argue whether the journey actually captured much of what was there. They saw little, the visit was short, and their single window cracked from the pressure. Sleep well. You're still falling, slowly, steadily. One gauge hisses, adjusting internal pressure. Another flashes a warning about external hull integrity, but it's routine, probably. You silence the alarm, your heart rate doesn't drop. A strange flicker appears on the monitor. At first you think it's a jellyfish, then a plastic bag, then neither. It moves too intelligently for trash. Whatever it is, it disappears into the void before you can log it, just like that. Remember this, the ocean is not your friend. It tolerates you briefly because you bring with you air and lights and questions. But it does not need you. It existed before the first vertebrate flopped onto land, and it will still be here long after we are a forgotten species pressed into the stone. You check the sonar, something large, far off, maybe a ridge or maybe movement. Historians and marine biologists often debate what really lives down here. Every year brings a new first ever sighting of a fish that glows, inflates, has no eyes, or is 90% teeth. Some seem more cryptid than creature. In this darkness, your thoughts are no longer quite your own. The sea speaks in pulses and groans, sometimes literally. Hydrophones have picked up deep-sea quakes and eerie low-frequency hums that no one's fully explained. Some think they're tectonic, others blame whales. A small, delightful group insists it's sea monsters. Who are we to disagree? There's a reason we say space is less explored than the ocean. By area, we've mapped less than 25% of the seafloor in detail. Most of it is guesses stitched from sonar and grainy images. It's not fear that keeps us from diving deeper, it's logistics, budget cuts, and occasionally a rational concern for implosion. You wipe condensation from the window. Outside, a pale shape drifts by, translucent, slow, the size of a small car. Some kind of siphonophore. You blink, it's gone. Maybe it wasn't there at all. A reminder pops up. Your mission is simple. Descend, observe, return. Easy to say from the surface. Down here, time stretches. Seconds elongate, distorted by pressure and the strange calm that settles around you like an old blanket, or a shroud. You flick on external lights and the darkness recoils. Particles dance in the beams. Marine snow, mostly organic debris falling from upper layers. Dead plankton, fish poop, the confetti of ocean life. It never stops. And yes, that's the same stuff your submersible is silently gliding through. Don't think too hard about what's coating the outside of the pod. Your depth gauge ticks. 200 meters. You're officially in the bathypelagic zone, the midnight zone. No sunlight, no plants, just you, the pod, and whatever lurks where light fears to tread. You see something flash ahead. 3 pulses of green-blue light in a vertical line. An anglerfish, maybe, or something mimicking one. Bioluminescence isn't just decoration here. It's used for hunting, hiding, flirting. Imagine flashing your headlights just to say, "Hey, wanna mate?" or romantic. No. The pod's engines hum gently as you adjust course, deeper still. You feel it in your bones now, not just the descent, but the scale of it. You're in a realm so vast and alien that even its boundaries remain undefined. The deep is not a place. It's a concept, a pressure dream, a liquid cathedral where evolution experiments in silence. You're still dropping, slower now, as if the ocean is beginning to notice your presence and deciding whether to let you stay. Your depth gauge reads 2,800 meters and climbing well into the realm where pressure stops being an idea and becomes a physical sensation. Not on your skin, of course, the submersible protects you from that. But you feel it in the way your ears pop every time the internal pressure adjusts, in the way the hull creaks like an old ship in a storm, and in the faint vibration under your feet, like the ocean is tapping a single massive finger against the metal to see if it rings hollow. The number people always like to toss around is 1 atmosphere for every 10 meters of water depth. So by now, you're under about 280 atmospheres, 280 times the pressure you feel on the surface. That's like stacking a commercial airliner nose down on your head. Except it's water, which is heavier, sneakier, and way more judgmental. It doesn't crush all at once, it waits for the smallest flaw, a missed weld, a forgotten seal. One tiny imperfection, and the ocean will politely fold you in on yourself like a paper fortune teller from middle school. This is where steel starts groaning, where titanium starts earning its paycheck. Most submersibles never go past 4,000 meters, not because we can't build machines to survive the descent, but because doing so makes everyone extremely nervous. Even the smallest sub has to be constructed like a spacecraft. Wires must be doubled, pressure vessels must be spherical, and every bolt must be perfect. You may have noticed, humans are not perfect. You lean forward, forehead resting on the thick viewing dome. There's something almost meditative about it, just your breath, your heartbeat, and the unending void outside. At this depth, light no longer filters from above. Everything visible is either mechanical or biological. Your floodlights sweep across the seabed, but most of what you see is sediment, broken only by the occasional cluster of rocks or a curious crater. Nothing overtly threatening, but nothing inviting either. Then the pod lurches slightly, just a nudge, like a subway train taking a curve too fast. Your seatbelt locks for a second. A moment later, a sharp hiss, the air pressure adjusting. You check the readout. External pressure has increased again, but all systems are green. Still, your fingers tremble slightly as you tap the panel. You tell yourself it's excitement, maybe. Back in 1875, the HMS Challenger expedition revolutionized our understanding of the ocean by lowering weighted ropes into the depths and pulling them back up with samples. They found life where none was expected, and temperatures far colder than anyone predicted. But here's the kicker. Historians still argue whether the Challenger crew actually discovered certain species or simply contaminated their samples on the way back up. That's the deepest sea for you. Everything down here resists being known. You run a systems check, everything's stable. But then there's that sound again. A creak, followed by a tiny metallic plink. You tell yourself it's normal, the pod settling into deeper pressure. The engineers said this would happen. They were probably right. Probably. Just then something smacks gently against the hull, not hard, almost like a nudge. You blink and glance at the monitor. Nothing on sonar. Whatever it was has floated off or never existed in the first place. But there's a smear on the external camera, like a smudged thumbprint of bioluminescent goo. For one glorious second, you consider that something might have tried to touch you back. Then you remember the transparent blob you saw earlier. That could have been this, or something else entirely. Here's the part that no one tells you. Even in a sealed pod perfectly designed, the psychological effect of this much pressure creeps in. You imagine the hull buckling, you picture a leak forming, your brain starts scripting horror stories your eyes can't confirm. It's one thing to imagine pressure as numbers, it's another to hear the metal around you sing from the weight. You adjust your seat, trying to ignore your heartbeat in your ears. A small comfort. This isn't even the deepest humans have gone. In 2012, film director James Cameron solo-piloted a dive to nearly 11,000 meters in the Mariana Trench. His custom-built sub, the Deep-Sea Challenger, was essentially a vertical torpedo packed with foam and dreams. It made the trip in about 2 hours. When he got back, he said it was peaceful, like another planet. You're beginning to understand what he meant. There's a serenity here, a deadly calm that could almost lull you to sleep if you didn't keep catching phantom movements just outside the view. A tiny flicker, a shadow, a sudden dimming of your lights, then normal again. Are you seeing things? Probably. But probably isn't very comforting in a place where 99% of the ecosystem is still undiscovered. In the corner of your screen, a warning blinks briefly. Internal humidity rising. You mutter something under your breath, adjust the vent settings. Must be your breath fogging the sensors. Or a slow leak. Aha! Just kidding. You reach out, tap a control and initiate lateral thrusters. It's time to explore, not just descend. Your sub tilts gently and begins drifting parallel to a ridge. The seabed here is uneven, rippled like giant fingerprints pressed into the mud. Scientists still argue over what causes certain deep-sea formations like these. Tectonic movement? Underwater landslides? Something older? And then, from the corner of your floodlight's reach, you see it. A sharp cliff face, perfectly vertical, rising from the seafloor like a monolith. It's unnatural in shape, almost sculpted. You lean forward, frowning. You've seen sonar renderings of such features. Tectonic plates sometimes fracture into bizarre angles. But this, it looks placed. Your skin prickles. You file it under investigate later. Right now, you're too busy staying alive. You check your oxygen levels, your CO2 scrubbers, your hull temperature. Everything's fine. Absolutely, perfectly, suspiciously fine. The pressure outside is now over 320 atmospheres, and you're only halfway down. The ocean has stopped pretending to be anything less than alien. You're hovering just above the seafloor now, gliding slowly at a depth where sunlight is not even a rumour. The darkness is no longer an absence of light. It's a substance. It presses against the hull like thick syrup, swallowing every beam your external floodlights try to throw. And then, in the gloom, something flares. Not a warning light. Outside, a burst of green, then a curling spiral of blue that fades into violet. You freeze, then another flicker, different this time. A burst of strobe flashes. You swing the pod around. There, life, it's unmistakable. Hovering about 10 meters off the bottom is a creature you wouldn't believe if you weren't looking right at it. Translucent, maybe a meter long, with long trailing filaments that flash with bioluminescence in rhythmic pulses. You don't recognize it, though it sort of resembles a comb jelly. But this one pulses like a heartbeat, and its colors flicker in distinct patterns. Is it communicating, flirting, threatening you? No one really knows. Here's the thing about life down here. It doesn't play by the usual rules. No photosynthesis, no plants. Instead, most of what survives in this abyss depends on one of two things: scavenging whatever falls from above or creating energy chemically. You're staring at the latter. Your sensors pick up a temperature spike nearby. That can mean only one thing: a hydrothermal vent. You adjust course, guiding your pod toward the glow that's not coming from your lights. As you approach, the darkness suddenly cracks open to reveal a landscape that looks more volcanic than aquatic. Black chimneys arise from the seabed, spewing what looks like smoke. But it's not smoke. It's superheated, mineral-rich water erupting from fissures in the Earth's crust. And around these chimneys, life. Teeming alien life. You drift closer, awed. These vents are called black smokers, and the water they eject can reach temperatures over 400 degrees, hot enough to melt lead, but pressure keeps it from boiling. Despite the heat, life clusters here in mind-bending abundance. White crabs scuttle over rock. Eyeless shrimp hover in clouds. Giant tube worms, some over 2 meters long, stand upright like organ pipes, their red plumes waving gently in the current. It's surreal. These organisms don't need the sun. They rely on chemosynthesis, bacteria converting toxic chemicals like hydrogen sulfide into food. It's like finding a forest on the surface of Venus. This discovery shocked scientists in the late 1970s, back when the Galapagos Rift first revealed this underworld ecosystem. And historians still argue whether these vents may even resemble conditions on early Earth, or, wild thought, on other oceanic moons like Europa or Enceladus. You ease your pod in closer, sensors clicking. The shrimp don't scatter. They seem to sense you, but they're not afraid. Many are clustered around the hottest part of the vent, where the temperature gradient would boil a surface fish alive. But these aren't surface fish. These are survivors in a realm that kills anything uninvited. A robotic arm reaches from your pod to collect a sample of the rock and the white bacterial mats growing across its surface. This slime, beautiful really, may be among the oldest kinds of life on Earth. If you're lucky, one of the lab team's topside might even find a new species in your haul. Then you see something else. Just beyond the largest vent is a pit, a crater perhaps, but inside it, there's movement. A flicker of something large, larger than any tube worm or shrimp. You slow your pod, holding your breath, even though logically the ocean can't hear you. It's an octopus, or at least something that has the general shape of one. Pale as milk, motionless, arms splayed out across the rocky rim. When your lights brush over it, one massive eye opens and stares. Octopuses are no strangers to the deep. Grimpoteuthis, the Dumbo octopus, flaps its ear-like fins through the abyss at depths of 3,000 to 7,000 meters. But this one is different. Bigger, stockier, more watching. Of course, it vanishes in the blink of an eye, curling away into a fissure like a dream you forgot mid-sentence. But the memory lingers. Marine biologists love to say that deep-sea ecosystems evolve in isolation, like islands, but wetter. You get creatures that are hyper-specialized to one narrow environment, often unable to survive anywhere else. That's how you get vent-specific worms, blind fish, and shrimp with heat sensors in their backs instead of eyes. Nature, with a little time and total darkness, gets deeply weird. Fringe theory time. Some researchers have argued, quietly, that the genetic diversity in these vent communities is so unique it may come not from Earth's crust but from further out. Panspermia theories. Maybe life didn't start on Earth, but arrived here, via comets, perhaps, and simply found a home in this boiling underworld. Historians still argue whether such ideas are science fiction or just underfunded hypotheses. You sit back, letting your vessel drift in the water. The vent towers before you like a Gothic cathedral, wrapped in sound and smoke, lit from within by the glow of life doing its thing without permission from the sun. You imagine what it would be like to be born here, to live your whole life in this chemical bath, never knowing light, wind or sky. And yet, here they are, alive. A tremor shudders through the pod, just a gentle quake, but enough to make your heart jump. Vents often signal tectonic activity. Some grow taller over time, others collapse without warning. You note the coordinates and decide to move on. No sense becoming part of the food chain just yet. As your pod ascends a few dozen meters, you glance back. The vent fades into the distance, its plume drifting upward like a ghost vanishing into the black. In its place, the darkness returns, complete, heavy, yours. You drift onward, leaving the vent field behind, and with it the last sign of warmth in this abyssal world. Without the glow of molten rock and the frantic dance of tube worms, the darkness settles in like a weighted blanket soaked in ice water. You guide the pod in slow, lazy arcs, scanning the terrain for life, for motion, for anything that isn't mud and cold. You pass over a ridge, and the sonar pings a strange anomaly, a column of rising particles, too slow to be thermal, too ordered to be random. You edge closer. Below, the seabed is littered with delicate structures, fine threads and thin shell-like tubes sticking out of the mud like a shattered porcelain sculpture. You squint at the monitor. No, not debris. These are creatures. A colony, maybe. Their bodies resemble skeletal trees made of glass, translucent and motionless. Then one of them twitches, very slowly, as if in deep, slow time. You found a community of suspension feeders, possibly benthic ctenophores, or some yet-to-be-named cousin. They anchor to the seafloor and extend long sticky filaments into the water to catch particles, marine snow. It's a buffet made of leftovers, and everyone here eats from it. There's something deeply humbling about the deep-sea food chain. Up above, life is fast, predators chase prey, sun powers plants, and time moves with purpose. Down here, patience is the economy. Some creatures wait days, weeks, even months for a meal to drift by. You can almost hear them whispering, "Wait long enough and everything falls eventually." And they're right. From whales to fish scales, from lost trash to the occasional shipwrecked soul, the deep always inherits what the surface discards. It doesn't judge, it just absorbs. You watch as a faint cloud of particles drifts past the view. A broken feather, bits of algae, tiny crustacean corpses. It all falls slowly into mouths that never close. Your lights catch something moving at a strange angle. A fish, long and eel-like, winding through the water in graceful, too smooth coils. Its skin is nearly see-through, and its eyes, well, it doesn't really have any. Just two dark spots where eyes should be. Its body seems gelatinous, like someone tried to draw a fish using watercolours and gave up halfway through. It's a snailfish, maybe even a new variant. These creatures live in the deepest trenches, breaking records for pressure tolerance. Their bones are softer than ours. Their skulls barely calcify. Down here, hard things break. Flexible things survive. Fun tidbit: the deepest living fish ever recorded was found at over 8,000 meters. It looked more like a ghost than an animal. Historians still argue whether it was truly alive when found or in the final phases of cellular collapse. But you know what? Even if it was dying, it had made it. It had survived where nothing else could. That's a badge of honor. Something darker moves in the corner of your screen. You swing your lights toward it, just in time to catch a fleeting silhouette. Wide body, long trailing arms, and then it's gone. Probably a deep-sea squid, or your imagination. Either way, you feel your breath hitch. The pod remains silent, dutiful, doesn't care what you saw, it just records. The real truth about this place is that it's not empty. It's full. So full that your human senses can't pass what they're seeing. Everything moves slowly, subtly. If you blink, you miss a drama that's taken a week to unfold. Then your lights reveal something stranger, an arrangement of bones on the seafloor. Two ordered, rib-like structures, bleached white, partially buried in silt. You immediately slow the pod. Could it be a whale fall? Yes. As you move closer, the shape becomes unmistakable. A whale skeleton, stripped of flesh, its massive vertebrae lined up like an abandoned train. Around it, the seafloor crawls with life, hagfish squirming through eye sockets, amphipods dancing like tiny drunks. The whale fall is decades old, but still nourishing countless lives. Whale falls are rare and precious events in the deep sea. A single carcass can feed an ecosystem for 100 years. First come the scavengers, sharks, crabs, hagfish, then the bacteria, breaking down bones and lipids. Finally, weird specialist worms like Osedax, which literally digest bone with acid secretions. Cute, right? Evolution is nothing if not efficient. You stare in reverence. It's oddly beautiful. The whale's absence has birthed abundance. A skeleton becomes a city. You wonder how many times that's true on land too. How often endings nourish beginnings. You tap the console and tag the site's coordinates for research teams above. Then reluctantly you guide the pod away. As you glide back into open water, something catches your attention. A shimmer, subtle, like heat rising off pavement. But underwater, you squint. It's not a trick of the light. You're passing over a cold seep. Unlike vents, which spew superheated water, cold seeps leak methane and hydrogen sulfide from the ocean floor. And somehow life thrives here too. Clams, mussels, even chemosynthetic bacteria forming mats over the silt like organic wallpaper. You pass a cluster of mussels the size of dinner plates resting among the bubbling sediment, completely oblivious to how bizarre their existence is. The weirdest part. Cold seeps often smell like rotten eggs. You can't smell anything in your sealed pod, of course, but the thought makes your nose twitch. It's a bizarre detail. The ocean's darkest corners sometimes reek like a long-forgotten lunchbox. Fringe theory time again. Some researchers believe these deep-sea habitats might harbour viruses or microorganisms completely unknown to science. Viruses that might never make it to the surface unless, say, you bring them up accidentally. No pressure. You check your life support again, still green. For now, the sea is quiet now. No more flashes, no more anomalies, just the gentle hum of your pod and the pressure of 4 kilometers of water above your head. You've been down here long enough to stop fearing it. Or maybe you've just gone a little numb. The darkness is your sky now. the silt, your ground, and the only stars are things with teeth and lanterns on their heads. You glide forward in the hush, your submersible a drifting capsule of artificial life surrounded by a universe of slow decay and stranger endurance. The darkness is thick as velvet now, your beams cut only a few feet ahead before they're swallowed whole. Still there's movement, always movement. You've learned to recognize the lazy pulse of plankton clouds, the slow tumble of detritus, the occasional flicker of startled photophores. But this movement is different. This is stalking. The pod's sensors ping faintly. Not contact, just disturbance. A displacement in the water column. You slow to a crawl, something is circling. It's one thing to imagine deep-sea predators in the abstract. It's another to feel the subtle change in water pressure as something massive alters the current outside your tiny reinforced bubble. You don't see it, not yet, but it's there. A blur, a long shadow. You swing your lights toward it, and for a second they catch something. Glossy skin, pale, long, no eyes, just a mouth that opens sideways. It vanishes as quickly as it appeared. You exhale, a shaky breath you didn't realize you were holding. Predators down here don't hunt the way land predators do. They don't sprint. They wait. They ambush. They absorb your presence and then decide, quietly, whether you're worth the energy. You're not a fish, you're not prey, but you are an intruder, and that's enough. Take the gulper eel, for instance. A legendary deep-sea resident. Its mouth can open wide enough to swallow prey larger than its own body. It has a tail that glows, a lure to tempt the curious. Scientists have only captured a handful of blurry videos of them in the wild, most of which raise more questions than they answer. Historians still argue whether early sightings of it were even of the same species. Some even believe multiple cryptic species are being lumped together, simply because no one wants to admit how little we know. You move on, though not quickly. Fast movements attract attention down here. Instead, you settle into the lull of deep water survival, where everything is deliberate. Your instruments detect tiny vibrations, possibly seismic or just distant landslides. The ocean's bottom is never truly still. There's another flicker, this time something closer to the hull. You glance over and catch the fleeting glow of a lanternfish, darting through the beam of your light like a shooting star. These little guys are the backbone of the deep-sea food chain. Small, shimmering, and always on the move. They migrate vertically, rising toward the surface at night and retreating to the depths by day, though night and day are abstract here. Some species are so abundant that satellites can detect their movement. An entire migrating wall of fish, miles wide. It's called the deep scattering layer, and it's sometimes so dense that early sonar tech mistook it for the seafloor. Imagine that, a whole ocean of fish pretending to be ground. Historians still argue whether that was an innocent misreading or an early clue we weren't ready to understand. You pass by a small cluster of creatures clinging to a rock outcropping, crustaceans most likely. Their armour is glossy, black, reflective like obsidian. One of them raises a claw and scuttles backward into a crevice. Even they know how fragile their environment is. Everything here is built on the edge of collapse. One shift in current, one degree of change, and entire communities vanish. That's not dramatic exaggeration. It's just how the deep works. There's a structure ahead, not natural. You tense immediately. It's a rectangular grid of metal bars, rusted, warped, but clearly man-made. Your heart jumps. Shipwreck, mining debris, some forgotten experiment. You move closer and hover. The structure is tangled with coral-like growths, some of which are glowing faintly. Life always moves in. You log the object's coordinates, zoom in with external cameras. There's no nameplate, no obvious markings. But wedged inside one of the frames is a canister. Glass intact, metal sealed. Your mechanical arm reaches out and carefully extracts it. The canister hums faintly, possibly battery-powered, possibly just reacting to pressure changes. You secure it in the sample bay. This is how most deep-sea discoveries happen. By accident, by proximity, by stumbling onto the leftover footprints of human ambition. We think we know the oceans, but in truth, most of what we've done down here is drop things and forget them. There's a morbid example, nuclear waste barrels, sunk in the mid-20th century before regulations caught up with common sense. Some are still down here, leaking slowly into a world that can neither resist nor understand them. Historians and environmentalists still debate how much damage was done, or is still being done, but the fish aren't talking. You start to notice a shift in the biology around you. Fewer jellies, more crustaceans. The terrain is changing too. Rocky outcroppings giving way to a flatter, muddier expanse, the perfect hunting ground for ambush predators. Sure enough, you spot one, a stargazer fish buried beneath the silt with only its eyes and mouth visible, waiting for something dumb enough to swim too close. You'd call it horrifying, but from an evolutionary standpoint it's genius. Do nothing, eat everything. If only our economy worked that way. Another shape glides past your lights. This time it's unmistakably a squid, but not the kind that tops your calamari. This one's big, maybe 3 meters long, and covered in photophores that pulse in eerie rhythm. As it passes, its skin changes colour in waves. Communication, camouflage, emotion. The squid doesn't say, it just flicks its arms and vanishes into the dark like a dream you barely remembered. You drift quietly, half in awe, half in dread. It's hard not to feel small here, not just physically, but cosmically. This isn't your world. You're a visitor in a cathedral where the choir is made of jaws and ink sacs, and yet it welcomes you in its own quiet, unspoken way. The pod hums. Your oxygen's fine, CO2 levels stable, power reserve at 86%. Still, you check it all again. Habit, or maybe superstition, the deep encourages both. As you press forward, the ocean feels less like a place and more like an entity. Not hostile necessarily, but sentient in a cold, indifferent way. It doesn't want to kill you, just doesn't care if you live. And yet you keep going, because some part of you still believes there's something waiting out here, something never seen, something just beyond the next ridge. You glide forward, deeper still, and the sea begins to swallow sound. Even the gentle hum of the pod seems muffled now, like you're hearing it through a wall of cotton. It's not just pressure, though there's plenty of that. It's the density of water itself. At this depth, nearly 4,000 meters down, sound travels faster, farther and differently. It becomes directional, warped by temperature and salinity, but what it doesn't do is linger. Down here, echoes die fast. You flick on the hydrophones, curious, a low hum drifts in, deep, distant, almost like a thunderstorm being played backward. A minute passes, then another sound, a sharp mechanical ping. You freeze, not yours, something else. It fades as quickly as it arrived. Could be geological activity, could be another vessel, could be something that doesn't have a name yet. It's unnerving, the way sound behaves in the deep. Sometimes you pick up distant whale calls from hundreds of miles away. Other times, a crack in the hull sounds like it's right beside you. The most famous mystery of all might be the bloop, recorded in 1997, a massive ultra-low frequency sound picked up across the Pacific. Some say it was an iceberg breaking apart. Others whisper about giant squid or something older. Historians still argue whether the bloop was natural, artificial, or neither. Your own breathing seems too loud now. You tap your ear to adjust your headset. Useless. The silence isn't just outside, it's inside. It starts to creep in around the edges of your thoughts, turning your mind into a slow, echoing chamber. Time stretches. You feel like you've been down here for days. The clock says otherwise, but you don't trust it anymore. Then again a sound. Not from the hydrophones this time, from the pod itself. A low groan, like the hull is stretching in its sleep. That's normal. Reassuring even. It means the structure is flexing, adapting, but the second groan is followed by a click. And that's new. You turn in your chair, heart rate spiking, nothing on the pressure gauges, nothing in the cabin. You glance at the emergency escape checklist pinned beside the viewport and immediately regret it. The words catastrophic failure seem bolder than you remember. Still, everything reads normal. Probably thermal expansion or contraction, or just the deep sea reminding you that you're not alone. Not in the way you like. You turn your attention back to the viewport, and there it is. A shape in the darkness. Not a fish, not a rock, a structure, metal, or what used to be metal. You drift closer, and your lights brush against a rusted hull half buried in sediment, its edges softened by time and silt. A shipwreck. You feel your breath catch. The sheer size of it stuns you. You hover just above what used to be the stern. The letters are nearly illegible, eaten away by oxidation and decades of pressure, but you think you can make out a partial name. Wrecks at this depth are rare. Most ships never sink this far unless something catastrophic brings them down. World War II claimed many such vessels, torpedoed and forgotten. deep-water trawlers lost in storms, experimental subs retired to the dark. Each has a story buried along with the crew. You circle slowly. The deck is folded in on itself like an origami swan crushed under a boot. Barnacles and tube worms cling to the surface. A rusticle hangs like an icicle from a broken rail. It's both beautiful and eerie, an artifact frozen in stillness. There's no current here to disturb it, no scavengers, just dust and time. Through a gap in the hull you spot something glinting. Maybe brass, maybe a glass port. You don't dare risk the mechanical arm. Too delicate. Too close. Instead, you catalogue the position and push gently forward deeper into the wreck's shadow. Inside the cabin, or what remains of it, you see objects scattered in the silt. A mug, a book fused into a dark lump, a boot. There's a human shape beneath the debris, or at least the suggestion of one. It's impossible to tell. The sea preserves and erases in equal measure. There are entire cemeteries down here that no one will ever find. Historians still debate how long shipwrecks can remain intact in these conditions. Some rust away within decades. Others, protected by anoxic environments, can survive for centuries. The Titanic, for example, is being slowly consumed by bacteria, but remains surprisingly well preserved over a century later. And it's at just under 4,000 meters, right about where you are now. As you drift away, you feel a chill. Imaginary, of course, since your pod's cabin stays perfectly regulated. But still, that wreck wasn't just a ship. It was a warning. Down here, humans aren't explorers. We're just another form of driftwood. You continue into open water again, letting the darkness close around you once more. The silence returns deeper than before, but now it's tinged with something else. Not fear, not quite. More like respect. You flash back to a fringe theory you once heard, probably at a conference half attended by conspiracy theorists and half by oceanographers with too much coffee. The idea that the deep ocean acts like a collective memory, that it absorbs more than just physical debris, that every lost voice, every groan of metal, every death becomes part of the acoustic fabric. A watery record replaying itself over and over. No one could prove it, but you remember sitting in that audience and thinking, yeah, that tracks. You make a note to check your hydrophone recordings later. Maybe there's something buried in the static, maybe there's nothing. Either way, you're starting to feel the weight of the miles above you. It's not just the pressure, it's the stories. All these lives pressed into sediment, all these secrets the ocean didn't bother hiding, it just assumed we'd never look. You look now, and it looks back. You drift farther into the abyss, and the silence becomes something more than quiet. It becomes a sound in itself. It's the absence of splashes, of birdsong, of air. It wraps around you like thick velvet, a vacuum for every thought not nailed down. There's no surface chatter here. No gulls, no waves, no echoes. Just the delicate hum of your life support and the muted vibration of the pod's engine, barely audible. You try speaking aloud once, just to feel. Something familiar. And your voice sounds wrong, too loud and too human, in a place that doesn't speak your language. Out here, you begin to understand the gravity of silence. It's not peaceful, it's indifferent. The deep sea doesn't care what you're doing. It doesn't care what you've come to find. It barely registers you at all. That realization hits harder than you'd expect. You're unobserved, unremarkable, and wholly alone. Still, the pod continues forward, obedient, steady. You glance at the sonar, watching the blue sweep arc lazily across the screen. There's nothing. Then briefly a flicker, a small shape just off the bottom. You switch to the camera feed and spot it, an isopod, massive by surface standards, lumbering across the mud like a robot in slow motion. Roughly the size of a football, maybe larger. Its legs shuffle under a hard, segmented shell. It's the kind of creature that inspires horror movies, but in person, it's oddly gentle looking. Just another scavenger looking for a free meal in the vast underwater desert. Giant isopods are distant cousins of the pillbugs you might have flicked off a porch step as a kid. But these deep-sea versions are supersized. That's part of a trend known as deep-sea gigantism, a still mysterious phenomenon where creatures tend to grow much larger the farther down you go. Historians and zoologists still argue why. Some suggest it's due to the cold or lower metabolic rates, or the need to store energy between infrequent meals. Others think it may have to do with oxygen saturation or reduced predation. Or maybe it's just that, in a place this big, you need to be large just to be noticed. You float above the isopod as it disappears into a slow-moving cloud of silt. There's something comforting about its indifference. It doesn't flee, it doesn't react. It just keeps shuffling forward, like it's been doing the same thing for centuries. You angle your lights toward a nearby trench, just a shallow dip in the terrain, but deep enough to catch shadows. As the beams scan across it, you spot another oversized creature, a sea spider. Long legs, tiny body scuttling sideways in the clumsiest ballet you've ever seen. It pauses mid-stride, its tiny tube-like mouth pulsing as it feeds on a soft-bodied anemone. It's like watching an alien insect try to do surgery with knitting needles. You're seeing evolution pushed to the brink, survival sculpted into shapes you'd swear were fiction. At this depth, every biological choice is a negotiation with physics. Energy must be conserved, muscles are minimal, fat is hoarded, senses are specialized to the point of absurdity. You pass a fish that looks like a toothpick with eyeballs, darting through your lights like a whisper. It's there and gone, like everything else. Another theory flickers through your mind. Some scientists believe the deep sea harbors a genetic time capsule, creatures that haven't evolved much in millions of years, living fossils trapped in cold stasis. They don't need to adapt because their world doesn't change. No seasons, no tides, no weather, just pressure and blackness. Even Charles Darwin had to admit that deep-sea life posed a problem for his theories. Change is slow here, or in some cases, entirely optional. The pod passes over what looks like a crater, wide and smooth. Possibly a meteor impact, possibly just a collapse zone. It's impossible to tell without years of sediment analysis. You take a snapshot anyway. Historians still argue whether some of these formations could be evidence of long-ago celestial impacts, or just odd tricks of geology under pressure. You glance at the sonar again, a low pulse, then another. This time from behind. You swing the pod around and see nothing. Just drifting sediment and the tail end of a jellyfish trailing long, hair-thin tentacles. But you know the feeling now, you're being watched. Not in a paranoid thriller movie way, more in the way a forest watches a deer pass. Quietly, curiously, from beneath 1,000 leaves. You take a slow breath, check your oxygen again. It's fine. All the gauges are green. It always feels worse than it is. Another flicker up ahead, a shimmer of colour that seems out of place. You approach slowly and realise it's a cluster of bioluminescent anemones, their tentacles waving gently in the current. They pulse with purples and greens, soft pastel flares that seem too delicate for such a deadly environment. These anemones don't rely on light to live. They capture it from within, fueled by internal chemistry. Some species may even be using symbiotic bacteria to glow, a partnership forged in total darkness. Bioluminescence is the language of this world. It's how creatures find mates, lure prey, or confuse predators. There are fish with built-in headlights, shrimp that shoot glowing clouds like underwater flashbangs, and worms that explode into sparkles when threatened. You pass one such worm, a shimmering ribbon with flickering blue dots along its body. When it notices your lights, it spirals upward in a luminous corkscrew, then vanishes. It's hard not to feel hypnotized. The idea that light could evolve independently from the sun is something that once baffled scientists. But now we know better. The deep sea has its own constellation, its own physics of glow and deception. You just have to look close enough and wait. And waiting is exactly what the deep demands. Every mile farther from the surface costs you more than just fuel and time. It costs you certainty. Your thoughts stretch out like tendrils, trying to grasp meaning in the dark. The brain isn't designed for this silence, so it starts to fill it. You rub your eyes. Fatigue is setting in. A yawn slips out before you can suppress it, which is funny, because how can you be sleepy in a world that never sleeps? And yet even the deep sea, with its cold logic and monstrous hunger, seems to embrace rest. Creatures drift. Some appear to hover for hours, motionless, as though time has no power here. The silence deepens, and with it, the strange comfort that comes from knowing you are somewhere utterly foreign, but not entirely hostile. Just quiet and very, very alive. You don't notice the cold until you stop moving, or rather, until your mind does. As the pod hums along in its steady rhythm, you find yourself lulled into stillness, eyes heavy, breath slow. And that's when the cold creeps in, not into your skin of course, your cabin's still holding at a cozy 20 degrees Celsius, but into your awareness. into the spaces between thoughts. It's the cold of deep water logic, silent, patient, and totally indifferent to whether your neurons feel welcome. Outside, the temperature hovers just above freezing, roughly 2 degrees Celsius. It's a miracle anything functions in that kind of chill, let alone thrives. And yet here you are, floating through a world where life has adapted not just to darkness and pressure, but to a cold that never ends. You sweep the lights across the seabed and spot a field of what looks like shattered glass. Upon closer inspection, they're ice crystals, not from the water above, but from methane clathrates, solid methane locked inside cages of ice. The cold here doesn't just freeze, it traps. Chemical compounds form weird alliances, locking gases into solids that can lie dormant for centuries. Some researchers call them fire ice. A contradiction, sure, but this place is built on contradictions. Suddenly, a shape moves just beneath your pod. Long, thin, and sinuous. You catch a glimpse, just enough to recognize a deep-sea cusk eel. Not technically an eel, but it's got that unsettling ribbon-like grace. Its pale body undulates as it snakes between rocks dusted in silt. It doesn't seem to be searching for anything, just existing. You envy that a little. The cold affects biology in strange ways. Metabolism's slow to glacial speed. Reproduction takes years, sometimes decades. You pass a small coral outcrop and remember reading that some cold water corals are estimated to be over 4,000 years old. Think about that. They were forming when humans were still inventing writing. Historians still argue whether certain coral species might be the oldest living animals on the planet. Either way, these aren't your tropical party corals. These are deep, cold, and deadly quiet. You pause the pod just above the outcrop, watching the polyps wave in the barely there current. No vibrant reds or neon oranges here, just pale whites and gentle purples, like bruised porcelain. A squat lobster crawls lazily across the reef, its claws slightly raised like a slow-motion fencer. In this cold, every movement has a cost. Energy is precious. Decisions matter. You tap a note into your log. Life thrives in lethargy. It sounds poetic until you realize it's probably just science. The sonar chimes softly, an irregular seafloor profile ahead. You turn toward it and slowly approach what appears to be a depression in the mud, surrounded by what looks like a halo of rocks. Except they're not rocks. As you near, they twitch. Dozens of small ghostly fish, pale as fog, clustered tightly in a circular formation. Most are facing inward, toward the center of the pit. You've heard of this before. A spawning aggregation, or a feeding frenzy, possibly both. Hard to tell. The temperature in these pits is marginally warmer than the surrounding water, possibly due to slow seepage from beneath the crust. These microclimates offer just enough thermal advantage to attract gatherings like this. You're watching the deep sea's version of a festival. Slow, quiet, and somehow still intense. You stay longer than you mean to. There's something mesmerizing about the scene, like a music box with invisible gears. A few of the fish drift apart, but most remain in their spiral. You're not sure what they're waiting for, but then again, everything here is waiting. In the distance, you spot a rise in the terrain. As you approach, you realize it's a ridge, jagged, rising from the flat plain like the spine of a buried creature. You steer closer, scanning for life, and find something remarkable. Icefish. You'd read about them, you weren't sure they were real, but there they are, drifting like ghosts, their translucent skin veined with faint silvery lines. Icefish are unique among vertebrates. They have antifreeze proteins in their blood, and some species lack hemoglobin entirely. Their blood isn't red, it's clear. And yet they survive. In fact, they do just fine. They live in water that would freeze the flesh of most fish solid. It's as if nature decided to design a fish that could say, "Go ahead, make it colder, I dare you." You watch one hover motionless above a rock, fins barely twitching like a suspended leaf. Another glides by, not quite acknowledging your presence. You wonder if they see you as just another current, something to float around. It's hard not to anthropomorphize them, to give them names or feelings. But these creatures aren't pets. They're survivors of a world where warmth is rare and motion is expensive. You try to imagine their lives, lifespans counted in decades, sensory worlds built on pressure and chemical traces instead of sight and sound. Their version of day might be the slight warming of a passing vent plume. Their vacation might be drifting a few feet into warmer water. The bar is low, but somehow they meet it. The cold has other effects too. Enzymes, those tiny biological catalysts that make life tick, slow way down. Reactions that happen in milliseconds at the surface can take seconds or longer down here. Some species have adapted by evolving entirely new enzymes. Others have just slowed their metabolisms until they barely burn energy at all. Sleep, in a way, becomes a strategy, not just for safety but for survival. You start to feel drowsy yourself, which is ridiculous. You've had more than enough oxygen, and the temperature inside the pod hasn't changed. But the atmosphere, the psychological one, presses on you. Everything down here is so slow, so deliberate, it's like being gently hypnotized by time. You flick on a soft interior light to shake the feeling. The cabin glows faintly, a warm golden contrast to the ice-blue floodlights outside. It's a tiny rebellion against the cold. Your heartbeat evens out, your fingers flex, you're still here. And so is the cold waiting patiently outside. The deep doesn't rage, it doesn't attack, it just persists. Something brushes past your pod, and for a brief stomach-tightening moment, you think it's touched the hull. Not hard, just a gentle scrape like fingernails across fabric. You freeze, then swing the floodlights around, heart thumping. There's nothing, just the usual swirl of sediment stirred by your own movement. But then it happens again, a flicker on the edge of the camera feed, a shape fast and wide disappearing upward into the dark. You hold your breath, waiting for the impact that doesn't come. The monitors are quiet, gauge is steady. You try to laugh it off. Maybe it was a false sonar echo. Maybe it was nothing at all. But that's the problem with the deep sea. Nothing often turns out to be something with teeth. You spin the pod in a slow arc, cautious. Your lights catch a trailing tentacle. Then another. They vanish almost immediately. You lean in and there it is again, just at the periphery of vision, circling. Welcome to the predator zone. At this depth, you're in territory dominated by creatures designed not for speed or strength, but for patience and ambush. You've entered the world of the fangtooth, the gulper eel, the dragonfish, and worse, things that haven't even been named yet. A shadow passes directly in front of the pod, large, graceful, gone before your brain can register its shape. Your external microphones pick up a faint pulse, like water being displaced by something heavy and fast. You don't say anything aloud, but you grip the console a little tighter, because here, movement means intent. Let's talk about the dragonfish, one of the reigning nightmares of the deep. It's only about 6 inches long, but it looks like it's auditioning for a horror film. Long, needle teeth too big for its mouth, photophores down its side, and, in females, a glowing barbell that dangles from the chin like a haunted fishing lure. The dragonfish uses red bioluminescence, one of the few creatures that can see in red light at this depth, which means it's basically hunting under its own secret spotlight. That's not just creepy, that's brilliant. You pass through a cloud of smaller fish, silver flashes in the gloom. Then the cloud erupts, scattered by something far larger, moving just beyond your light's reach. Your sonar stutters, a quick burst, an anomaly, then nothing. It's easy to think the scariest thing in the ocean is something big. A shark, a squid, some kraken-esque legend dredged from seafaring nightmares. But down here, sometimes the scariest thing is what's invisible, what's listening, watching, choosing not to act, yet. You flick through your camera views again, just mud, just water, just a mild sense that you're not the one doing the observing anymore. You're being followed. A fringe theory floats back to mind. Some researchers have speculated that apex predators in the deep operate on loops, broad, slow migratory circles over the course of weeks or months, following the availability of prey, mating cues, even undersea currents. And some of them are opportunistic, curious, intelligent. Historians still argue whether deep-sea cephalopods exhibit long-term memory, but most agree they can recognize patterns, avoid traps, even anticipate behavior, which means it might recognize you. You reduce power to the external lights, letting them dim to a soft glow. It feels like turning off a flashlight in a haunted house, irrational, but necessary. You guide the pod toward a low ridge and settle behind it, letting your trail of bubbles fade. You sit there for a full minute, motionless. Then from the edge of the ridge, something glides into view. It's big, at least the length of a car. Sleek, dark and slow. You can't tell if it's a squid, a shark, or something between the two. Its body undulates like it's made of silk. No bioluminescence, no eyes you can see, just smooth predatory movement. And then it's gone again. There's a moment of silence so thick it almost hums. Eventually you exhale. Not every encounter ends with a toothy grin or a dramatic chase. Sometimes the deep just reminds you it's watching, testing, measuring your place in the food chain, and choosing just this once not to act. You boost the lights again and ease the pod forward. Returning to your course, you check your instruments, no damage, but your nerves feel stretched. A string tuned too tight. You pass a few more clusters of life, small glowing jellies pulsing through the gloom, some trailing fibres longer than your entire vessel. One jellyfish drifts so slowly it might as well be still, its body pulsating in slow motion waves. Its tentacles shimmer faintly in pink and green, beautiful, sure, but deadly. Some species have stings powerful enough to drop a fish cold, and some, you realise, have never been tested on humans. You keep your distance. Then there's the vampire squid. You've read about it. Despite the name, it's more of a scavenger than a predator. Soft-bodied, with long cloak-like webbing between its arms and bioluminescent tips. It floats, rarely swims, just drifts, arms out like some deep-sea Dracula, feeding on detritus with slow, eerie elegance. You spot one now, upside down, slowly twirling in place, its arms curled inward in a protective pose. As you pass, its photophores dim, a signal that it's not in the mood for visitors. Respectfully, you drift away. Back on sonar, another ping. Not fast this time. Something stationary. A structure. Your curiosity stirs again, relief creeping in through your fear. You've lived through the watchers. Now it's time to watch something back. But before you go, you log a note. Predator presence confirmed, unidentified, observed restraint. It's the best you can do. You don't have the footage, but you felt it. And sometimes, in the deep, that's all the evidence you get. The ridge rises like a bruised spine from the seabed, a slow incline marked by jagged stone and the occasional stunted coral fan. You ease the pod upward along its slope, following the sonar's quiet beckoning, and as you crest the ridge, your lights catch something that sends a ripple of unease through your chest. It's familiar, but wrong. A sea star, massive, easily 2 meters across, clings to the rock. At first glance, it seems like the usual abyssal variety. White, slow, radiating 5 uneven arms. But then it moves, not in the sluggish gliding way you'd expect. It twists one arm inward sharply, almost like a muscle spasm. Then again, and now that you're closer, you realise its skin isn't smooth. It's covered in tiny hair-like projections that sway slightly in the current. Sensory cilia? Defence mechanism? You've never seen one like it. There's something uncanny about seeing a known shape altered, just enough to set your instincts humming. Like a dream about your own house where all the doors are on the ceiling. You drift past it slowly, careful not to disturb its space. The ridge beyond drops off sharply into another trench darker and deeper than the one before. You follow the edge cautiously, lights sweeping downward. Your sonar pings, and you spot the feature your instruments hinted at. A cavern, or rather a tunnel low and wide with what appears to be a soft descending slope. You hover just outside it. The entrance is framed by the large boulders that seem placed, though you know that's just your pattern-seeking brain doing its thing. Right? The pod's lights barely penetrate the tunnel, but you flip on the directional floodlight and ease forward a few meters. The walls are smooth. Not natural smooth, eroded smooth. Like something has passed through here before, many times. You feel the pressure building as you descend slightly into the mouth of the tunnel. This is madness, obviously. No human in their right mind would take a one-person sub into a potential cave-in zone 4 kilometers beneath the surface. But here you are, because curiosity is a harder instinct to silence than fear. The light catches something on the tunnel wall, a pattern, no, a texture. Ridges running in parallel lines, as if something massive and slow scraped its way along the rock. You record footage, unsure whether it's biology or geology, or both. Fringe marine geologists have long argued over strange grooved formations found deep in ocean trenches. Some claim they're just glacial scars. Others suggest burrowing megafauna. Historians still argue over reports from early deep dives before modern cameras of paths carved into the mud that seem to go on for miles. You pause, unsure how far to proceed. The tunnel continues, gently sloping, seemingly endless. but you pull back. Not because of danger, because of something else. The silence here is wrong. Throughout your dive, silence has been a companion, cold, constant, enveloping. But now it feels anticipatory, held breath, the kind of silence you get in the moments before something happens. You reverse course, slowly, carefully. The tunnel fades behind you, swallowed by the darkness. As you exit, you catch something odd in the sediment near the ridge's base. A spiral, not a rock formation, not a natural ridge, a trail. Something moved in a spiral flat against the seafloor, wide, repeating. You log it, you move on. It's not your job to understand every mystery, just to witness them. You angle the pod along the trench's outer edge and begin drifting downward again. The terrain is sloping and uneven now, more chaotic than before. Boulders jut like broken teeth from the mud. Some are coated in fine orange sediment, possibly iron oxide from slow hydrothermal seepage. Then you see them. Giant amphipods, each the size of a rat, translucent shells gleaming under your lights. They're feasting on something. You edge closer. The mass they're clinging to is unidentifiable at first, just a lump of soft tissue. But as you orbit slowly, you catch the telltale curve of a dorsal fin. A dead fish. But not just any fish. A tuna. You blink. Tuna aren't deep-sea dwellers, which means this body fell from the surface, maybe dragged down by a net or lost from a trawler. Or maybe it swam too deep and suffered pressure trauma. In any case, it's become a banquet. Dozens of amphipods writhe across it, others hang back, waiting. The smell must be intense, though you'll never experience it. Not here, but you imagine it, rich, sour, heavy. The sea doesn't waste anything. This fish will be gone in days. You watch as one amphipod tears into flesh with scissor-like mandibles. Another pushes it aside. Tiny battles, all happening in slow motion. The most aggressive predators here are also the most patient. And when the food finally runs out, they'll vanish again into the sediment and wait, is what they're made for. Nearby, another shape stirs in the silt. A hagfish. Its long, tubular body shimmers faintly as it glides toward the carcass. It doesn't have a jaw, not really. Just a mouth that pulls tissue apart like wet cloth. It begins its own feeding process, slipping inside the tuna like a thief in the night. Gross? Yes. Brilliant? Also yes. Fun fact, hagfish can exude gallons of slime when threatened. It clogs the gills of predators, suffocating them. It's one of the few animals on Earth that actively makes its predators regret their life choices in under 2 seconds. You stay with the feeding scene a little longer than you should. There's something oddly comforting about it. A cycle you recognize. Life, death, consumption, waiting. Simple, uncomplicated, nothing hiding behind it. Then the lights catch another movement, off to the left. A lone rat-tail fish drifts slowly through the gloom, long tail trailing like a ribbon. It doesn't approach the carcass, just glides past, disinterested. You follow its motion for a few seconds. Then the sonar pings again. Another structure ahead. And this one doesn't look natural. The structure emerges slowly, like a secret surfacing from centuries of sleep. Your lights reveal the first line of it, a row of oddly shaped protrusions rising from the seafloor, equidistant, uniform in height, too straight to be accidental. At first, you think it might be another wreck, another lost vessel consumed by rust and time. But as you glide closer, you realize this isn't debris. This is arrangement. Intent. Thick columns, stone or something like it, jut upward in a perfect arc, each one weathered but intact. They seem to mark a path, leading towards something deeper in the trench. You drift along the trail cautiously, half expecting it to collapse or vanish like some elaborate illusion. But it stays. You pass between the columns and your lights catch the ground beneath. Smooth, slate-like stone covered in what looks like a thin coating of microbial mat. And carved into the stone, lines, not cracks, not scratches. Lines. Symbols. You aren't trained in archaeology, but your instincts are screaming. These aren't geological patterns. They curve in loops, form spirals, cross over in grid-like repetitions. Not random, possibly natural in origin, but mimicking structure in a way nature almost never does. Historians still argue whether similar deep-sea mystery structures, reported in the past, mostly by sonar or dredging, were misidentified volcanic formations or something more. Most never receive follow-up dives. Too expensive, too fringe. You try to capture as much footage as you can. The pod's external cameras sweep slowly over the engravings. Part of you wants to dismiss it. Just another example of pareidolia, that charming human glitch where we see meaning in meaningless shapes, faces in clouds, words in static. But the longer you stare at the markings, the less random they seem. And then, at the far end of the path, the trench opens into a shallow basin, and there, in the centre, sits what you can only describe as an object. It's not metal, at least it doesn't reflect like any known alloy. It's dull, matte, coated in centuries of sediment, but its outline is unmistakably geometric. A flattened dome, not unlike a radar array or the top half of a buried sphere. Around its base, more of those columns stand in a ring, some toppled, others perfectly upright. The urge to speak aloud, to say, "What is this?" catches in your throat, as if the act of asking might wake something. You steady the pod and zoom in. The dome is cracked near the base, a fissure wide enough to peer into but too narrow to enter. You move the external light over it and find darkness within darkness. A hole so deep your beam simply stops. You feel a whisper of vertigo despite being seated, like your mind doesn't want to acknowledge the scale of what it's seeing. Then your lights catch something else. Motion, a faint shimmer deep inside the fissure. You freeze, a glow pulses once, twice, then fades. You wait. Nothing follows, but now the silence feels different again, reactive, like the deep is listening. You back away slowly, not in fear exactly, in reverence. Whatever this thing is, it predates your understanding. Could it be volcanic in origin? A mineral growth from tectonic stress? Maybe, but that's the thing about anomalies. They don't fit cleanly into the boxes science likes. They sit just outside, daring you to redraw the edges. You circle the basin, documenting every angle. Your logs are already overflowing, footage banks nearly full. You whisper into your mic, half a report, half a prayer describing dimensions, materials, proximity to vent fields. You include the possibility that this is just a formation shaped by rare geologic forces and wish you believed that. Historians still argue over the infamous Baltic Sea anomaly, a sonar blip found in 2011 that resembled a disc-shaped structure buried in sediment. Theories ranged from natural rock formations to submerged UFOs to the last crumbling remains of a glacial iceberg trail. No one ever confirmed it definitively, but standing here now, staring at this impossible dome surrounded by standing stones, you can't help but wonder if these aren't isolated mysteries but parts of the same long-forgotten story. You begin your ascent from the basin, pulling back carefully. As you rise, your lights sweep across the seafloor behind the structure, and there, half buried in mud, something glints. You pivot and move in. It's a shard, maybe glass, maybe crystal, sharp-edged, about the size of a coin. You extract it with the robotic arm, sealing it gently into the sample bay. It hums faintly, possibly a resonance from the arm, possibly nothing, possibly not. You continue upward, rising above the ridge, letting the pod drift for a moment in neutral buoyancy. You switch off the external lights and sit in complete darkness, just to listen. No sonar pings, no creaking metal, no engine hum, just silence. Except, no, not silence. A distant low-frequency pulse, then another. You power up the lights again. Gone. The deep doesn't answer questions. It lets you ask, then offers riddles in return. You mark the coordinates and log your final notes on the site. Then you guide the pod slowly away from the trench, retracing your path along the ridge. You're leaving the structure behind for now, but it doesn't feel like you're escaping it. If anything, it feels like it's watching you go, not resentfully, just patiently, as if it knows you'll be back. Because let's face it, humans never let a good mystery rot in peace. The pod continues forward, and behind you the symbols fade into darkness. You leave the basin behind, and the trench cradles you again, like a winding river through a black, breathless canyon. The further you drift, the more the structure becomes a dream, half-remembered, blurry at the edges. You log the coordinates 3 times, just to be sure, just to remind yourself later that it wasn't the pressure talking, that you really saw it. The terrain begins to shift beneath you. The sharp ridges soften, the jagged rock fades into rolling dunes of silt. Here the seafloor is powdered and ghostly, like wind-blown ash dunes frozen in time. every current leaves its signature. A swirl here, a spiral there, delicate traces of passing creatures that might never be seen again. And then, without warning, the pod shudders. A soft, unsettling vibration. Not internal, external, the ocean just moved. You cut propulsion and wait. Instruments flicker, briefly. A spike in pressure, then a dip, then unmistakably the long, slow roll of a seismic wave, an earthquake. The pod rocks again, this time slightly harder, like it's being nudged by a massive hand. You grip the console, instinctively holding your breath. Outside, clouds of silt erupt as the seafloor convulses, a silent landslide of fine particulate tumbling down an unseen slope. Rocks shift. One large boulder breaks free and tumbles forward, vanishing into the murk. Still, the pod holds, built for pressure, built for motion, but earthquakes are another story. You check the external hull pressure, no changes, structural integrity holding. The pod is rattled, but fine, you less so. Deep-sea quakes aren't rare. In fact, they're more common than most people think. The ocean floor is a patchwork of tectonic plates, always grinding, always adjusting. Some of the largest earthquakes in history originated in the sea, like the 2004 Indian Ocean quake that triggered a tsunami and changed coastlines forever. But down here, beneath the waves and far from shore, most quakes go unnoticed, unless you're inside them. Historians still argue over ancient shiplogs describing waves from nowhere, sudden disappearances, even glowing water during quakes, things science can't fully explain. You're not eager to add yourself to that category. You remain still, waiting for aftershocks. None come. The ocean quiets. The silt begins to settle. You take a slow breath. Then something strange. The water temperature increases, slightly, just half a degree, but in a world of constancy, that's massive. You scan the terrain and spot it, a plume curling out from a crack in the seabed like smoke rising from a fractured lung. Hydrothermal activity, fresh, possibly caused or at least awakened by the quake. You guide the pod toward the plume, watching as the dark water shimmers and bends around the heat. The plume rises 20, 30 meters before dissolving into the surrounding cold, and around its base, life. You see it before your instruments confirm it, clusters of organisms already arriving, already adapting. White crabs, shrimp, worms with fans of scarlet waving from their tubular homes. These animals are part of a class of life that thrives in chaos, extremophiles, creatures that treat boiling chemicals and toxic gases like a five-star buffet. It's astonishing how quickly the colonizers appear, as if they've been waiting just outside the darkness, ready to rush in the second the kitchen opened. Scientists have long known that these communities establish themselves rapidly, some within days of vent formation. You're watching it happen. Evolution on fast forward. You record everything, temperature readings, footage, chemical traces, and then you notice the colour of the plume itself. It's darker than usual. More iron, possibly manganese, possibly something stranger. A memory surfaces, back in the 1970s, when hydrothermal vents were first discovered near the Galapagos Rift, no one expected to find entire ecosystems there. It changed our understanding of life's origins. Some even proposed that life may have begun in such vents, tiny microbe colonies fueled by chemistry instead of sunlight. It's still debated. Some argue for tidal pools, others for spaceborne amino acids. Historians still argue whether those early expedition notes underestimated the scale of what they saw. You pass your external light slowly over a boulder near the vent. It's covered in fine crystal formations, metallic and delicate, like frost patterns in a mine. Possibly new mineral formations forming under the pressure of recent activity. You collect a sample. The robotic arm closes carefully around a sliver of the rock, locking it into the containment bay. Then something darts out from behind the boulder. Fast, reflexive, a flash of something iridescent. You twist the camera, but it's gone, likely a vent-dwelling eel or shrimp. Possibly something never seen before. You can't chase it. You'd risk destabilizing the vent region. Still, the motion leaves a ripple, not in the water. In you, a small reminder. You're not alone, not now, maybe not ever. You ease the pod away from the vent, careful not to stir the sediment too much. You pass a few deep-sea jellyfish, long trailing tentacles, their bells pulsing in rhythmic grace. One of them flares blue as you pass, a slow-motion firework, It drifts upward, uncaring. The deeper you go, the more you realise this isn't a dead world, it's just slow, quiet, measured. Life isn't absent, it's selective. As you glide beyond the vent field, the terrain levels out. Another silt plane. You reduce engine output and coast forward on inertia. Every movement matters at this depth. You've learned to let the water carry you when possible, to become part of it. Ahead, the lights catch a depression, not large, shallow, but filled with black fluid. At first you think it's shadow, then you realise it's a brine pool, a lake inside the ocean. You stop the pod just above the edge. The liquid in the pool is denser than seawater, loaded with salt, toxic chemicals, sometimes even methane. It doesn't mix, it just sits there, a liquid boundary where few things survive. You watch as a small fish, possibly a cusk eel, dips too low and bounces off the surface like it hit glass. It recoils, wriggles upward, and disappears. Brine pools are often deadly, but not empty. Around the edges, life clusters, shrimp, mussels, extremophile worms, all eking out existence along a toxic shoreline, the border between two worlds. You sit for a long moment, watching the surface of the pool ripple faintly. There's no wind, no moon, no sky, but it feels like looking out over a haunted lake. You think, if the sea has dreams, this is where it dreams them. Then the sonar pings again, another formation ahead, and the pod drifts on. You drift on from the brine pool like a ghost boat skimming the edge of something sacred and vaguely toxic. The pod is nearly silent now, engines barely nudging you along, just enough to keep your course true without stirring the sediment into clouds. Outside, the sea has returned to its quietude. No sudden bursts of life, no monstrous flickers, just the low hum of waiting things and the soft collapse of time. The light from your flood lamp spills across a smooth patch of seafloor, like a flashlight across old parchment. Faint ridges pattern the mud, maybe old worm tracks, maybe current-shaped ripples. You can't tell anymore. Everything down here feels like a message, but the alphabet is unknowable. The trick you've learned isn't to interpret, it's just to observe. Let the ocean do the talking. Eventually your lights catch something new. A wall. No, not vertical. A shelf. A broad, wide rock outcropping rising slightly above the silt, its surface fractured into hexagonal shapes. It looks unnatural, but this time you know it's not. Columnar basalt, formed from slowly cooled lava flows. A reminder that even down here, beneath crushing pressure and endless dark, the earth still breathes fire when it wants to. You pass over the formation, lights brushing across the dark rock, something sparkles. Tiny crystals embedded in the stone catch and scatter your beams in muted rainbow flickers. A microgeode field? Possibly. You tag it for later. It's pretty, which feels silly to say considering everything else you've seen, but sometimes even monsters need a little glitter. Beyond the basalt shelf, the terrain opens again, flat, broad and oddly empty. No colonies, no scavengers, just mud. You pause, flip on the hydrophones again. Silence. No crackles from vents. No far-off whale calls, just a heavy, endless hush. The deep has exhaled. And here, in this sudden stillness, you finally begin to feel it. The weight of your own exhaustion. Not the frantic kind, the quiet kind. The kind that rolls in gently like tidewater across sand. It's in your shoulders, your neck, behind your eyes. You blink slowly. The instruments blur, then sharpen again. You check your oxygen, not because you're low, just to prove to yourself that you're still functioning, still real. All green. You think of sleep, not the practical kind, the mythical kind, the sort of sleep where you forget where you are, when, why. Down here, that kind of rest doesn't feel like indulgence, feels like permission, but the pod keeps moving and so do you. Off to your right, something glows. Not bright, subtle, a slow rhythmic pulse in the dark. You swing your lights and spot it, an anglerfish. A big one, hanging motionless like a forgotten ornament. The light on its lure pulses every few seconds. It doesn't move, not even when you approach, just watches, or waits. It's hard to say. You hover beside it for a moment. The creature's body is all soft tissue and nightmare geometry. Jagged teeth, eyes like obsidian marbles, skin that barely seems to hold together. It looks like a sculpture made by someone trying to remember what a fish is after only hearing one described in a dream. Historians still argue whether some of the earliest accounts of sea monsters were misidentified deep-sea fish that had washed ashore, bodies bloated, distorted by decompression and decay. An anglerfish in the wrong light could absolutely pass for a demon. Eventually it drifts downward, vanishing into the gloom. You let it go. There's nothing left to do but continue. And so you do. You pass over a patch of seabed marked with what look like impact craters. Dozens of circular impressions, each about a metre wide, evenly spaced. Could be natural, could be the feeding pits of large fish. Some scientists theorise that deep-diving whales create such patterns while foraging. Others believe that some species of fish deliberately sculpt the terrain to attract mates, like underwater crop circles. Historians still argue whether such behaviour indicates intelligence or just instinct sharpened by evolutionary necessity. Either way, the circles give you a strange comfort. Patterns. Purpose. The pod continues forward, and eventually you notice it. Your breathing has slowed, your heartbeat settled, the panic of predators, the awe of ruins, the shaking of tectonic shifts. It's all behind you now. There's only this, the dark, the pod, and the quiet. You dim the interior lights, no need for brightness now. You switch the viewfinder to external camera only and let yourself drift. Beyond the viewport, the last specks of marine snow float down like lazy ash. Every few seconds, a tiny jelly pulses past, luminous like a dying ember. You spot a transparent worm trailing a mucus net longer than your arm, coasting through the dark with regal slowness. Even the pressure somehow feels less threatening. You know it's there. Thousands of pounds per square inch pressing against the hull. But you've lived with it long enough that it's become the background noise of your thoughts. You realise something else. You haven't checked the clock in hours, or maybe minutes. You're not sure anymore. Time like light doesn't really belong here. Instead, you mark time by movement. The drift of silt, the flicker of a passing creature, the cooling of the cabin as your systems begin dialing back power for conservation. You feel it in your bones now, not the pressure but the rhythm. You've synced with it. You've joined it. This is where sleep begins, not just for you but for the world itself. A jellyfish spins slowly like a ballerina. A deep-sea eel loops into a knot and unwinds. Tiny worms rise from the mud and retract again like hesitant dancers. Everything moves like it's underwater, because of course it is. And maybe, in a way, you are too. The pod glides gently, carried by the slowest current you've ever known. You lean back, your eyes drift closed for a moment. Not from fatigue, but from surrender. You've seen things no surface dweller will ever fully understand. You've touched something old, vast, and mercifully silent. You are no longer a visitor. You are part of the stillness now, and the deep, in its own way, has accepted you. Your pod floats like a thought suspended between waking and dreaming. After the silence, after the strange shapes, and predator shadows and ancient ruins, you've come to this, an open stretch of seafloor so barren it almost hurts to look at. The mud is pale, fine, untouched. No coral, no fish, not even the lazy drift of an isopod. For the first time since your descent, there is no life in sight. It's not hostile, it's just empty. You drift over the expanse with your lights dimmed low, more out of respect than caution. This place feels like it has rules, you just don't know what they are. The sensors show a drop in temperature, another ½ degree lower than what's considered typical for this depth. You're somewhere around 400-700 metres now. The pod is holding steady, but it creaks more often. A long, slow moan from the metal that reminds you uncomfortably that it was built by people, and people make mistakes. And then, without warning, the flat emptiness stops. You're suddenly above a ridge, short but sharp, like a lip around something deeper. You guide the pod upward to clear it, easing over the edge. The lights hit the far side and stop cold. You've found another brine pool, a much larger one, but this one's different. Instead of a smooth oval of dark liquid, this pool looks layered, striated, as though different fluids have settled into bands, each with a slightly different density. The top layer ripples with faint green light, below it blue, and below that black. It looks like someone poured oil, paint and ink into a bowl and stirred them just enough to forget their edges. You hover over it, stunned. This isn't just chemical, it's art. Along the pool's shore things live. Of course they do. Pale worms emerge from the sediment like thin candles, each with a soft plume at the top. Clumps of mussels form loose colonies along the margins, their shells cracked with heat lines, evidence of slow seepage beneath the pool. You spot a small shrimp, bright red against the grey mud, crawling with exaggerated caution toward the edge. It pauses, feels the chemical border, then scuttles backward. Even it knows the rules here, but then your light catches movement in the pool itself, not above it, inside. It's hard to describe what you're seeing. Something undulates just beneath the top layer, long, pale, and slow. Not quite fish, not quite worm. You catch a glimpse of ridged skin, faint bioluminescent bands blinking down its length in slow pulses. It doesn't rise toward you, it just moves across the width of the pool like a train beneath frosted glass. You record everything, of course. Video, sonar, thermal. But the pod's sonar keeps glitching over the centre of the pool. Reflections bounce back with distorted signatures, as if the pool's density layers are scrambling the signal. It's like the brine doesn't want to be mapped. You back away slightly and notice the terrain again. Around the far rim of the pool, the seafloor isn't natural anymore. The mud has hardened into a kind of crust, cracked and spined. In one place, it's split wide open into a small trench, not more than a metre across, but deep, so deep your lights vanish into it. You could send the remote arm in for a sample, but something stops you. Instinct, or maybe respect. This place feels like it's meant to be left alone. Scientists have long debated whether deep brine pools act like barriers, zones so extreme, so chemically distinct, that they serve as evolutionary bottlenecks. Species that live within them can't leave, and those outside can't enter. Historians still argue whether early accounts of forbidden lakes in ancient sailor logs were imaginative interpretations of such pools. Most think it's coincidence. You're not so sure. You back the pod away, slow and careful, the water clears as you retreat. The glimmering bands of the pool fade to a memory behind you. But you can't shake the feeling that you've just witnessed something sacred, or something cursed. You guide the pod upward again, ascending a gentle slope, returning to more familiar terrain. The emptiness doesn't bother you now. It's a relief, a recovery. And then, up ahead, something even stranger. The mud begins to change colour. First a subtle yellowing, then a rusty red. It's not volcanic, not hydrothermal. It's organic. You increase magnification, and the mystery resolves itself. Mats. Thick bacterial mats stretched across the seafloor like tattered carpet. They form weird swirling patterns, concentric circles, frayed spirals, slow blisters of microbial bloom. It's hypnotic. These mats, likely made of sulfur-reducing bacteria, are some of the oldest life forms on Earth. Their ancestors go back billions of years. They were here long before your pod, before your species, before even oxygen was a thing, and now here they are, thriving at the bottom of the sea like ancient graffiti artists. You resist the urge to reach out with the robotic arm. You've learned. Some things are better left undisturbed. You record, you observe, you keep moving. A movement flickers just ahead. Something long, undulating, trailing slime. You recognize it instantly. The bootlace worm. Well, a bootlace worm, possibly a cousin. This one is wider than the textbook examples, maybe a metre long, maybe more. You can't see its full length. It trails off into a crevice and just keeps going. Its body ripples like gelatin in slow motion. It leaves a slick trail in the mud, faintly iridescent. You shiver, even knowing it's harmless. There's something about a worm longer than you are that makes your skin crawl. The bootlace worm is a record holder, one of the longest animals known to science, some specimens measuring over 50 metres when stretched. That's longer than a blue whale. Historians still argue over an old report from the early 1900s describing a specimen over 60 metres long found washed up in Scotland. Was it exaggerated, misidentified, or just one of the many things that surface rarely and disappear before we can understand them? You watch this one vanish into the trench ahead. You don't follow, or you're content to let it slither into legend. Above, the seafloor rises again. A slow incline, you follow it. The darkness feels thinner somehow, though your lights haven't changed. Maybe your eyes are adjusting, maybe your mind is drifting. The pod hums beneath your hands, steady, familiar. You've travelled miles down here, through predator zones, past toxic pools, across seafloor deserts and forgotten shapes. And now, as you rise slightly along the incline, you feel it. The threshold. Not to the surface. You're still far from that, but a shift, like you've passed through something you weren't supposed to see and the deep is quietly letting you go. You ease the pod forward, exhaling for what feels like the first time in hours. Behind you, the brine pool sleeps. The incline continues gently upward, and with each meter you ascend, the water feels marginally thinner, though not in any measurable way. It's more like a shift in tone, a softening of the silence. Your instruments still read the same, external pressure holding at over 470 atmospheres, temperature hovering just above freezing. But the hush no longer feels so heavy, so absolute. It's not quite comfort, just a loosening. You're starting to believe the deep might actually let you leave, and then, inevitably, something goes wrong. The first sign is subtle, a flicker in the cabin lights. Just a moment, barely a pulse, then a clicking noise from the panel behind your seat. You twist around slowly, heart knocking once against your ribs. The pressure gauge is steady, oxygen levels good, but the pod's internal diagnostics panel is cycling, over and over, rebooting. You tap the manual override, no response. That's when the second thing hits. A soft thud from outside. The whole pod jolts, not dramatically, but enough to knock your shoulder against the console. Lights flicker again. Warning indicators bloom across the interface like a sudden rash. Gyro drift, magnetic compass fault, environmental sync lost. You're no longer sure what direction you're facing. Your stomach drops, not from motion, but from pure animal instinct. You try the thrusters, no response. The pod rocks again, then begins to tilt gently as though it's being rolled in the palm of something enormous and extremely patient. Outside, the darkness is still unbroken. Nothing appears on sonar, but you know you were followed. You were watched, and now you are being tested. The third event is worse. The cabin temperature drops by 2 degrees in under 60 seconds. Your breath clouds. A warning chime pulses faintly. The pod's thermal control system has disengaged. Your hands start to tremble, not from fear, not yet, but from the cold. The slow kind, the kind that seeps in through your bones and settles in the spaces between your thoughts. You try the power cycle again, it grinds, then nothing. You're floating, adrift in a tiny machine meant for quiet observation, now being forcibly reminded of its fragility. You've always known the statistics. Deep-sea exploration vessels operate under extreme conditions, and redundancy is key. There are backups for backups, fail-safes upon fail-safes. But even so, once in a while, something fails. You flick to external view, no damage to the hull, no breaches, the pod is still intact. Then you hear the hissing. It starts low, like steam through a pipe, and rises slowly in pitch until it becomes a barely audible whine. You scan every panel. It's not internal. It's the CO2 scrubbers. They've gone into emergency purge mode, dumping the chemical medium prematurely. Your carbon dioxide levels are about to start climbing. You're not in danger yet, but you've begun the countdown. There's oxygen left, enough for hours, but only if the CO2 levels stay stable. Once they rise past a certain threshold, your body won't care how much breathable air remains. It'll just stop. You take a breath, force it steady. There are manual scrubber resets, you know that, but they're mechanical. They require time, dexterity, and calm, all three of which are quickly leaving the room. But you're not dead yet. You reach under the main console and pop the service panel open. It creaks, probably the cold. You pull the reset lever halfway and hold it, waiting for the manual override to sync. The lights flicker again, and for a split second, your HUD flashes something entirely unexpected. Foreign signal detected. External source. You freeze. That's not standard, not even remotely. Then it vanishes. The pod's lights stabilize, the whine stops. CO2 scrubbers re-engage. You breathe out long and shaky. But what was that signal? You flip through your interface logs, backtracking. Nothing. No waveform, no source ID, no data burst. Just that message. Like someone or something tapped the hull, whispered, "We see you," and left. Historians still argue whether deep-sea transmissions recorded over the past century, low-frequency pulses, sonar reflections, rogue pings, are natural phenomena or artificial signals. Most have been written off as tectonic events or instrument faults, but now, with your pod freshly recovered and your systems gently purring like nothing happened, you can't help but wonder if those weren't just glitches, but greetings. You sit back, adrenaline fading, muscles trembling. You run full diagnostics. The pod is operational, compass recalibrated, thrusters online, life support stabilizing. You're fine, but you don't feel fine, because the deep doesn't usually give things back. It takes, it consumes, it hides, and yet here you are, alive, pod intact with systems recovering faster than protocol suggests they should. No predators on the feed, no visible cause for failure. Just that message, that touch. You check your sample bay, still locked. The strange crystal fragment is inside, undisturbed, maybe not unobserved. You tap your external lights to full and push the pod forward, leaving the ridge behind. No looking back. You're not ready for answers, just survival. A few minutes pass, you drift over soft terrain again. The silence returns, but now it's different. Softer somehow, less invasive, as though the ocean is giving you space. You check the hull pressure, stable, cabin temperature rising, oxygen steady, CO2 acceptable. Your fingers unclench from the console. You hadn't even noticed how tightly you were gripping it. The pod hums, the lights flicker back to their natural glow, the silence becomes music again. You exhale slowly and move on. The pod glides forward now with a kind of solemn ease, like it knows you've passed a test. The systems hold steady, all readings green. Even the cabin feels warmer, not just in degrees, but in spirit. The panic has faded. In its place, a low, persistent hum of thought. Not fear, just awareness. A tightening of the mind's eye. You've seen something or felt something that doesn't match the textbooks, but instead of running, you're following. Up ahead, a strange light pulses on the seabed. Not bioluminescence, not artificial, something else. You steer the pod toward it with careful precision, angling the floodlights low. The light resolves into the flickering strobes of rotating equipment. Metal arms, long cables, sediment dredges. Machinery, still active. It's a mining platform. Half buried in silt, draped in kelp-like plastic and seaweed, it lurches in the deep like a sleeping insect. You hadn't expected to find one this far out. These installations are rare, experimental and controversial. You drift closer and the scale becomes clear. This isn't a robot. It's a full-scale operation. Automated, yes, but designed to harvest mineral-rich nodules from the seafloor. You spot the collector head, massive, wide-jawed with suction tubes coiled like intestines. It's silent now, dormant, but it's been used. The ground beneath it is scarred with drag marks and muddy trenches, signs of repeated scraping. You hover the pod, scanning. In the distance, a line of crushed manganese nodules stretches like a broken necklace. Each one is about the size of a potato, rich in cobalt, nickel, rare earth elements. The deep sea's buried treasure. That's why this platform is here. Not for research, not for exploration, for profit. Ocean floor mining is one of the most contested practices in marine science. The promise? Untapped resources worth billions, enough to fuel electric batteries, solar panels, green tech for generations. The price? Disruption of ecosystems so fragile we barely understand them. Historians still argue whether early mining permits were granted with full awareness of the damage, or whether nations simply turned a blind eye. Either way, the operations continue, quietly, deeply. You rotate the pod, inspecting the collector's hull. It's pockmarked with rust and microbial growth. One of the drill arms is missing. The sediment around its base is darker than the surrounding seafloor, probably due to chemical runoff. And near the far edge, you spot something unexpected. Motion. A cluster of white crabs, scavengers picking through the machine's wake. You move closer and catch a glimpse of something else. A broken container, possibly an instrument pod, with wires spilling from the side like entrails. And beneath it, a glimmer. Not light, not metal. Eyes, small, clustered, reflective. Watching. The creature emerges slowly. A fish. Pale and flat, with extended pectoral fins and a body that seems to hover just above the mud. It doesn't flee, just floats. A sentinel. You've read about this kind of behaviour. Animals adapting to disturbances by claiming the leftover spaces. Some thrive in the shadows of human intervention. Others simply endure. The debate over deep-sea mining is anything but simple. Advocates argue it's cleaner than land mining, that the deep replenishes itself, that the areas targeted are deserts with low biodiversity. But you've been down here. You've seen the life, the glimmering anemones, the whispering worms, the ancient slow-drifting giants that take centuries to grow. Deserts? Hardly. You log footage, taking slow passes over the platform. One of the upper arms bears a serial number, barely legible beneath the rust, DS93 Orion. You tag it in your report. Later, someone topside might look it up. Maybe it's a sanctioned project, maybe not. These machines don't always ask permission. You swing the pod around and see the real damage, a swath of torn seafloor extending into the distance. The mud has been scraped clean, turned over like fresh graves. In the distance, a second platform sits abandoned, its lights out, its collector arm twisted. You don't approach. It looks like a monument, a warning. You float between the two machines in silence, letting the pod coast. Above you, the water column is thick with suspended sediment. Clouds kicked up and never settled. They'll stay like that for months, maybe longer. Anything that lived here? Gone? Anything that might have lived here? We'll never know. You think back to the vent fields, the brine lakes, the delicate corals older than your species. And now, here. Machines scooping the future into sacks and leaving the past in their wake. You wonder what kind of world we're trying to build when we scrape the bottom of this one for parts. The fringe theory re-emerges, unbidden, that some places in the ocean are resisting us, that equipment malfunctions aren't just engineering problems, but rejections, reactions, that the deep has limits, and we keep pushing them. Historians still argue whether lost drones, broken tethers, and sudden shutdowns are the result of human error or something else. The sea doesn't speak, but sometimes it doesn't have to. You pass over a final trail, smaller, more delicate, a path where small creatures have returned, creeping along the edges of destruction. Amphipods, eelpouts, anemones on stalks, reaching up as if to reclaim their home from beneath the scar. Life always tries, even here. You leave the mining field behind with a mix of awe and guilt. It's not just a question of survival anymore. It's a question of permission, of stewardship. You guide the pod upward, banking along a narrow rise, and find yourself back in clearer water, less debris, fewer scars. A ribbon eel slinks past, its blue skin glinting in your lights. A stingray-sized jelly pulses slowly behind it, trailing a dozen tendrils like lace. The ocean reasserts itself, not in violence, just in presence. You've been reminded. You log your notes, mark the machines, tag the damage, but there's no entry field for what you feel, so you leave it blank and continue on. You're drifting again, skimming just above a slope that dips down into darker water. The pod's floodlights fading into a liquid curtain so dense it may as well be night made solid. After the mining site, the water feels cleaner, the terrain quieter, though the stillness now carries a strange tension, as if the sea, having let you witness one wound, is preparing to show you something else entirely. The sonar chirps once, then again, a soft double ping. There's a formation ahead. You slow the pod to a crawl. The floor tilts down and widens into a basin, one not carved by tectonic action or collapse. It's too symmetrical, too intentional. At its centre, a shape rises, a large object, half buried in silt, circular and ridged like a fossilized turbine. You inch closer. The structure is immense, maybe 20 meters across, flattened like a stone disc. It glints oddly under your lights, but not like metal, more like bone or ceramic. It doesn't match any known wreck profile. You hover above it, scanning with every tool the pod offers. Sonar, LiDAR, chemical sensors, magnetic flux. The responses come back muddled. Too many mixed materials. A high content of silica, some manganese, traces of something synthetic, possibly polymer composites, possibly volcanic glass, possibly something else. You circle the disk slowly, maintaining altitude. Around its rim you begin to notice grooves, equally spaced, shallow, each carved with a tapering edge. Not random, not natural, these aren't scratches. These are inscriptions. They're eroded, time-worn. Some are broken or lost beneath sediment, but others remain. Loops, lines, angular impressions. You don't recognize the symbols, not anything you've seen from oceanic tribes, ancient ship markings, or mineral formations, not anything human. Historians still argue whether out-of-place artifacts reported in early deep-sea explorations, bizarrely shaped objects found during cable-laying expeditions and oil surveys, were the result of misinterpretation or something more. Most have been dismissed or buried in bureaucracy. You think of those dismissed reports now, you think about how often we delete what we don't understand. You engage the remote arm, carefully brushing sediment from the disk's edge. It flakes off in thin, dry sheets despite the moisture. Beneath the top layer, a surface appears. Dull black, ridged like obsidian, but with a fine lattice pattern, almost like circuitry. You freeze. You're trained to expect strange biology, geology, even chemistry, and not this. A sharp, static whine crackles through the pod's comms, startling in the silence. You spin in your chair, but nothing's changed. No alerts, no external breaches, just that sound. It fades. Then your HUD flashes again. Source. Proximity 8.1 m. No ID. Then gone. You take a breath. Your pulse is loud in your ears. The pod's power flickers, not dangerously, just enough to remind you that whatever this thing is, it's active. Maybe not alive, but not asleep. You back away slowly, lights dimmed. The basin is unnervingly still. Then movement. At first it looks like a current disturbance, a silt puff. Then it consolidates into a shape gliding across the far edge of the basin. It's too distant to see clearly, but the outline is wrong, angular, upright. It doesn't swim, it floats. You freeze the pod in place and it drifts closer. Slowly, curiously. You think it might be a fish, or a machine, or some unholy blend of both. It's humanoid in the vaguest sense. 2 limbs, upright posture, but there's no face. Just a bulbous, dark mass where a head should be. It stops about 20 meters from the disc and hovers. No sound, no motion, no threat. It's as if it's watching you watch it. You switch off all external lights except one narrow beam. You illuminate the figure's midsection, ribbed texture, irregular gaps, glowing pulses within. A biological power source? A warning display? You remember something one researcher once said years ago in a low-funded symposium? The deep sea doesn't just hold biology, it holds design. You thought it was metaphor. You try logging the encounter, but the recording function lags. The system stutters. No errors, just slow. You aim a camera at the figure, but it vanishes. Not into shadow, just gone. You rotate the pod, sweeping lights across the entire basin. Nothing. The disc remains, the trench edge still. You're not sure what you saw. The camera feed shows nothing. No shape, no trace, only the faint echo of sonar scatter, like something heavy passed through the water and left no wake. You think of all the debates, all the closed-door meetings, the redacted files, the sudden changes in expedition funding. You wonder how much has already been found, how much is buried not in mud but in silence. You disengage from the basin, you rise, and as you ascend the slope you see something that stops you cold. More symbols, not on the disc, on the seafloor itself, lines etched in the mud, massive, geometric, too straight for currents or sediment flow. They curve and twist into massive shapes, a spiral, a forked cross, a circle, intersected by 5 lines radiating outward. From this angle they make no sense, but from above they'd be seen. They were meant to be seen. You continue upward, logging everything you can, but already you know most of it won't make it past review. It will vanish, not maliciously, just filtered, misplaced, lost in the vast bureaucratic tide. That's what the deep does. Not just hide, it edits. As you rise, the symbols fade beneath you, swallowed by silt and dark. You feel like you've exited a cathedral, one no architect ever claimed. And somewhere below, the disc waits, unblinking. You start your ascent slowly, nudging the pod upward in delicate pulses, watching the pressure gauges tick down millimeter by millimeter. No sudden moves, no shortcuts, because rising too fast from this depth is a death sentence wearing a smile. The deep isn't just about getting down, it's about getting out, without bursting like a shaken can of soda. The lights stay low, sonar silent. After what you just witnessed, whatever it was, it feels wrong to make noise, like leaving a library in the middle of someone else's prayer. Your instruments still log steadily, capturing water chemistry depth, ambient temperature, radiation levels, though none of that data feels particularly helpful right now. What can a thermometer tell you about the shape of dread? You pass 4,500 meters, then 4,300. Your body feels lighter by fractions, though you're still entombed in steel. Cabin pressure holds, CO2 levels remain stable thanks to the scrubber's miraculous revival. You rotate the pod slightly to one side and glimpse the trench below. It disappears into blackness like a curtain someone forgot to close. The disc, the basin, the strange watcher, all of it now feels like part of another world you were never really meant to enter. But there's no going back. You know that. Not physically, not mentally. You've passed some threshold, and the ocean knows it too. Your next checkpoint is 3,900 meters. That's the upper edge of the abyssal plain you crossed earlier. You'll need to rest there, literally pause the pod, to equalize internal systems. The human body, even sealed in a pressure-regulated capsule, can only handle so much altitude change without losing cohesion. You initiate the standard procedure. Hold at target depth for 20 minutes. Let your blood, lungs, and machinery remember gravity, oxygen, identity. Outside, the landscape starts to change again, from jagged trench wall to softer seafloor. The transition is subtle, less chaos, more calm. You find a flat patch of mud and settle the pod gently. It exhales a soft groan, like it's relieved to sit still. You turn off the external floodlights, sit in darkness, let your eyes adjust to nothing. This part, the decompression, feels more spiritual than medical. You're not just acclimating physically, you're letting go, letting the deep unhook its invisible fingers from the back of your neck. You try not to think about the anomalies, the watcher, the artifact, the signals. Instead, you focus on something simple, the rhythm of your breathing, in, out, the faint hum of the life support, the slight warmth from the control panel under your palms. This is how you return. Slowly, like memory. After 15 minutes, you activate the upward thrusters again and begin the next leg of the ascent, from 300 to 3,000 meters. Still a long way to go, but now each meter brings relief. The pressure decreases, and you no longer feel it in your jaw, your ears, your bones. Your thoughts sharpen. The cabin no longer feels like a tomb. It's becoming a vessel again. You pass a cluster of midwater creatures, suspended in motionless grace. Comb jellies, thin as veils, flicker with iridescent light as you coast by. A small shoal of lantern fish drifts past in a V-shape, each one blinking in synchronized rhythm. A deep-sea shrimp darts close to the pod, spins once, then disappears upward as if late for an appointment. This part of the water column, the bathypelagic zone, is where some species migrate vertically, daily, up at night, down by day, an endless unspoken commute. You envy their purpose. You pass 3,100 meters, then 3,000, another checkpoint, another pause. You rest the pod again, just above a seamount barely visible through the gloom. The slope rises behind you like a shoulder blade dusted in sponge colonies and coral fans. Life begins to cluster again, the higher you go. The pressure still kills unprepared bodies instantly, but life down here has learned to wear it like a jacket. You think about the early divers, Jacques Picard and Don Walsh descending in the Trieste in 1960. No GPS, no live stream, just a steel ball, a single window, and enough faith to fill the Mariana Trench. Historians still argue whether their instruments picked up signs of fish at the bottom, or whether it was a mechanical artifact. Either way, they came back changed. So will you. Your systems chirp, the hold period is complete. You rise again, from 3,000 to 2,000 meters. Here, the water starts to feel less like a trap and more like a highway. The currents strengthen. The pod rocks gently in the movement. You pass through a zone of soft turbulence, tiny updrafts and eddies spinning debris in lazy spirals. Marine snow increases, dead plankton, fecal pellets, microscopic dust. It floats down endlessly, feeding the world you just left. You spot a large gelatinous blob drifting sideways, possibly a Stygiomedusa gigantea, the elusive giant jellyfish that's rarely filmed. It floats like a bedsheet caught in wind, 4 long oral arms trailing behind it like tattered ribbons. It doesn't react to your presence, just exists. That's what the deep teaches in the end. How to exist quietly, persistently, in the dark, under pressure, with no promises. You think of the strange object, the disc, and the watcher. You wonder if they're still down there. You know they are. The sea doesn't lose things, it just waits for them to be found again. You approach 2,000 meters, another pause. You turn off the lights again, rest, watch the glow of bioluminescent creatures flare around the pod like fireflies caught in syrup. This far down, they're everywhere, flashing, pulsing, signaling in languages you don't speak. Maybe that's the real message, not warning, not invitation, just presence. The deep doesn't need to explain itself. It is. You're nearing the upper limits of the deep and you feel it, not just in the numbers scrolling past on your display, but in your body. The weight pressing in from all sides has eased. Your breathing feels less like an act of defiance and more like something automatic again. You're climbing out of the abyss, meter by meter, as though the ocean is reluctantly loosening its grip. At 800 meters, the change becomes unmistakable. The darkness isn't quite so absolute anymore. It's not light exactly, but there's a gradient to the black, a softness, as though the water itself has become less secretive. Above you lies the mesopelagic zone, the twilight zone, that strange middle layer of the sea where light begins to intrude just barely, and shadow becomes a thing with structure. You ease into it carefully, pausing again at 1,600 meters to give the systems time to equalize. The pod rocks gently in a current, and for the first time in what feels like forever, the movement feels natural. You let your hands rest on your lap and close your eyes for a moment just to feel your own heartbeat. You're still here. You reopen the floodlights and rise again. Marine snow swirls past like confetti. Some of it is organic, some isn't. Bits of plastic glint under the lights, small frayed strands of fishing line, a candy wrapper folded into a clump. You pass a weathered glass bottle, labelless, pocked with barnacles, just a message with no note. It's a sobering reminder. You've seen the wonders of the deep. You've witnessed life in form so strange it defies description. You've encountered stillness that feels sentient. And here, in the slow ascent toward daylight, you're already surrounded by trash. Humanity's calling card. You keep moving. At 400 meters, a pod of hatchetfish flutters past. Tiny, delicate creatures with reflective scales and upward-facing eyes that catch the faintest hint of light from above. They move together, shimmering like coins tossed into a fountain. One veers close to your viewport, then flicks away again with a tilt of its fins. You wonder what it sees, a glowing orb, a threat, a curiosity. Somewhere between 200 and 1,000 meters, the shift becomes emotional. The trench feels behind you now, the disc, the watcher, the silent artifact. All of it is part of a memory that's already starting to feel like dream logic. But the pod is real. The readouts are real. The data, the samples, the logged coordinates. Still, something inside you knows. You've changed. Coming down, you were full of questions, scientific, precise, dispassionate. Now? You don't even know which ones to ask. You felt things that can't be sorted into spreadsheets. You pass through a thick school of lanternfish. They flash like synchronized swimmers, reacting to your presence in choreographed pulses. Blue, white, dim, then gone. These are the creatures that make up the deep scattering layer that confused sonar operators for decades. Early sonar readings mistook them for the seabed, only to watch the floor rise and fall throughout the day. Historians still argue over how many submarine near misses and false alarms were caused by these tiny fish with their tiny lights. Entire Cold War stories, possibly sparked by a shrimp. You keep rising. At 800 meters, your floodlights start to lose their dominance. There's a faint glow above, barely visible, but it's there. Not sunlight yet, just its whisper. The ocean doesn't switch from dark to light like a dimmer. It blends, slowly, reluctantly, so. You pass an ancient-looking jellyfish, its bell slow and ragged. One tentacle has snapped and trails behind it like a ghost of its younger self. Still it pulses, still it floats. You recognize the feeling. By 600 meters, larger creatures reappear. A long-finned squid trails behind you briefly, curious. Its skin flashes red, then brown, then white, a conversation with no translation. Then it curls and bolts away like a ribbon caught in a storm. Then come the sharks. First, a blunt-nosed six-gill, its long body and prehistoric mouth giving it the look of something better suited for fossil beds than the present day. It swims just parallel to you, unhurried, clearly unbothered. At this depth, it has no natural predators, just time. You match its speed for a few moments, travelling together in silence. Its eye flashes once in your lights. Then it turns, vanishes into shadow. You're at 500 meters now. Half a kilometre from the surface. The water is no longer oppressive. The pressure is still deadly, yes, but The mental weight is lifted. The pod's interior hums gently, no flickers, no warnings. The strange signal from earlier has not returned. You think about turning around. The thought is immediate, strong, a magnetic pull back into the mystery. There's more. You know there's more, but the pod is low on reserves. Your body is beginning to feel the strain. The mission wasn't meant to last this long, and some knowledge only reveals itself when you don't pursue it. You rise. At 400 meters, the twilight becomes more than metaphor. There is actual light above, faint, filtered but real. Your floodlights meet it and dim automatically. It feels wrong somehow. Not unwelcome, just unfamiliar. You pass a cloud of siphonophores, long and chain-like, stretching for meters in every direction. One pulses close to your pod, its body lighting up like fiber optics. It's beautiful, fragile, the exact opposite of what you saw below, and still part of the same system. By 300 meters, the light is undeniable. You shut off your floodlights completely and let the ocean show you the way. The water is bluer now, not black. The pod's cabin feels warmer, brighter. You're almost back. But back is a strange idea now. You have data, yes, footage, samples, but you're not the same diver who left the sun behind. You've been seen by something, felt by something. The trench gave you an exit, but it didn't send you home clean. You reach 200 meters, then 100. The surface approaches like the first memory of a dream breaking apart. You should feel relief, you should feel joy. Instead, you feel something more complicated. Grief. Because down there in the dark you touched something real, something permanent. And now, as the world gets louder, brighter, faster, you know it's slipping away. You breach the surface. The pod bobs gently in the rolling water, the sky wide above you, and for a moment the noise of waves feels too loud, too harsh, too shallow. You turn off the engine, you sit in silence, and you wonder if it misses you too. You float on the surface like a bubble that forgot how to pop. Above you, the sky is the wrong kind of blue, too open, too vast, too casual. After the pressure and silence of the deep, the clouds look fragile. The sun doesn't seem like a source of life anymore. Just a bright, unblinking thing that can't begin to understand what you've seen. Waves lap gently against the sides of the pod, a sound that should be comforting, but now feels like static. Seagulls wheel somewhere in the distance. Their cries are sharp, thin, almost cartoonish after the hushed symphony of the trench. The surface feels performative, like it's trying to convince you that this is where life happens, but you've seen otherwise. You know better. Rescue protocols kick in. A quiet voice over the comms crackles through your headset. Muted, casual, human. You respond, though your voice sounds alien in your own ears. You recite the coordinates, confirm vitals, acknowledge the ascent. Yes, you say, all systems nominal. What you don't say is that your mind feels like a sealed jar someone shook too hard. You don't mention the watcher, or the disc, or the symbols carved into the seafloor, or the message that flashed for just a heartbeat, foreign signal detected, and then vanished like a dream evaporating under the weight of sunlight. The recovery vessel appears on the horizon, tiny at first, then growing larger. You sit back in your chair, watching it approach. You try to feel gratitude, try to summon the comfort of safety. But the feeling won't come, not yet. You're still suspended between realms, too far from the trench to hear its heartbeat, too changed to return completely to the surface. As they secure the pod with hydraulic arms and begin lifting you from the water, you glance one last time at the waves below. They shimmer harmlessly, but you know what lies beneath. And you wonder, when you return to land, will you carry this with you forever? Or will the trench recede in your mind like a dream swallowed by routine? You emerge into the open air with a hiss of pressure valves and the sharp scent of salt. Hands reach in, clipboards appear. People ask you things. Are you okay? Did the mission go as expected? Any anomalies? You nod, give them what they need. Yes, standard dive, no issues. But your fingers curl instinctively toward the memory of the control panel, toward the silence, toward the shape of the watcher at the edge of the disc. They roll the pod open. The light stings your eyes. You squint up at the sun and feel a pang of grief for the dark. Not because it was safe, but because it was honest. Back in the lab, they'll analyze the samples. The strange crystal will confuse them. The footage will show some of what you saw, but not all. The lights will be wrong, the scale will be off, the watcher won't appear, the signal will be missing. They'll ask gently if you imagined any of it. And you'll say no, because you didn't. What you brought back isn't proof, it's change. It's the realization that not everything in the deep is blind, soft and slow, that some things are watching, listening, maybe waiting. You're thinking about going back, and not soon, but some day. Because once you've heard the deep speak, you never stop wanting to understand its language. You lie in bed that night, on land, wrapped in sheets that feel too dry, breathing air that feels too loud, and all you can see are shadows behind your eyelids. You dream of black water, of slow lights, of impossible watchers, and you wake not with fear, but with longing. Because no matter how far you rise, the deep still calls. You're still lying there, drifting between sleep and memory, when the sound fades to almost nothing. No machines, no bubbling oxygen flow. Just the echo of your own breath and the imagined hush of water pressing in from all sides. You can still feel it, the rhythm of descent, the crush of the deep, the silence that wasn't really silence at all. You're safe now, back on land, curled beneath a blanket instead of titanium alloy. But your body doesn't quite believe it yet. Some part of you is still sinking. The images linger, the red flicker of a predator in the pitch black, the looping symbols etched into the seabed, the glimmering rim of a brine lake as still as a painting. Even now your ears search for the soft ping of sonar, the way light danced across ancient stone and drifted into meaning just beyond your reach. It's all still with you. The deep doesn't let go easily. Above, a ceiling, not water, not pressure, just drywall. But your mind paints it differently. A dark expanse, bioluminescent stars, shapes that pulse and twist with every slow blink. Maybe you didn't just explore the deep. Maybe the deep explored you. A quiet place has found a quiet place within you. And it doesn't need to speak to stay. Let your thoughts settle now gently, like sediment falling through dark water, drawn downward, not hurried. Let the pressure release, little by little. No alarms, no watchers, just weightless drift. Your breath rises and falls. You don't need to move, you don't need to rise. There's nowhere to go, no surface to reach, just rest. Sleep now, traveller. The trench will still be waiting. Quiet, patient, deep.